Hey guys, first of all, welcome to the second part of the series on OpenAPI. First of all, I have to say this is the third time I recorded today. It's now, I don't know how late, it's now half past midnight, and I do the third session. So I'm very mad at myself. First time, my mic was off. Second time, OBS did not record and I didn't recognize. Now the third time. Anyway, second part. For those of you who didn't watch the first part, it's probably a good idea to do it because I will reference a lot from the first part. But besides of that, if you are a pro and you say I don't need to watch the old .NET 8 thingy, I know how it works, blah blah blah. Okay, fine. I will show the new .NET 9 stuff today. We will start a little bit with presentation, one slide only, to say what the actual changes are, and then we hop into the presentation in the hands-on, and we'll do it together. I will do it side by side. This is what you probably wouldn't do. You would not leave your old API in and then copy one over. That's what I'm going to do so that you guys can see it side by side in the Git, which, as I mentioned, I will put into the links down there to that video, to this video. With that, I think we're good to start. Let's hop over to my screen. So this is where we left off last time. I explained a little bit what's going on. And what basically changed with .NET 9 is that this is all going away. Mind you that I didn't remove that. I will come to that in a second. So what's going on? Basically, you now add a NuGet package. I will show it in a minute from Microsoft. And then you call add OpenAPI, which does the same as add Swagger did, putting in all the service dependencies and the dependency injection thingy that it needs. And then you call the middleware, you inject the middleware with map OpenAPI, and that does exactly that, inject the middleware. All of that is coming from Microsoft now, not from Swashbuckle anymore. And then you have a way to generate standardized OpenAPI schemas with kind of built-in functionality instead of depending on Swashbuckle. This is the major change in .NET OpenAPI. That's it. So, this means you can still use Swagger UI. No problem at all. And that's exactly what we're going to do because I want to keep Swagger UI, but I want to get rid of all the stuff which I don't swashbuckle to generate. I don't want it to generate it. I want to use the topmost two things to generate all the OpenAPI relevant stuff. And then I want to use Swagger as a UI. This is the point when you go to the Microsoft docs, which I also will show, you can see that they use a different one, which is Scalar. I don't know why. If they got, if there's a beef going on with Swashbuckle or what, I don't know why they used it. Maybe people don't like Swagger, I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's old and we want to see fresh stuff. Anyways, you are free to switch the UI with which you explore your APIs. I will show you how to keep Swagger in place. Don't have to. Okay, cool. That's the presentation thing. So we hop over to the demo. So with that, because it's the third time, I forgot to open my solution. Now I will do that for you. So this should be kind of the same as it was before. I added some stuff. Let me point that out. So first of all, I renamed my, my model here to not Swagger options, but Swagger configuration options. That's a minor change from the last video. Also, I added the git ignore file, which has just one line for that solution additionally, which is just the OpenAPI. Any OpenAPI folder will be ignored. This you will understand later. And then I added the readmes, which I explained, where you need to prep your dev environment after you cloned, if you want to clone it to your local thingy, and then that's it. Okay, this readme will get handy in a second. And then with that, we can start. So what we basically want to do, remember, we had this one, those three projects configured to have .NET 8 and .NET 9 support, so we can reuse all that in our new project, which we are going to create. So with that, let's start by creating the default template. File new project, and then ASP.NET Web API, and then let me just put that in the right location on my file system in the source folder, and then let's call it services.openapi instead of Swagger. Right, this is the same thing. .NET 9 instead of .NET 8. This is important. And then HTTPS, OpenAPI, use controllers, the same as it was before. But this checkbox actually changed its behavior. So create. So what we get is this. Let me set this as my startup project here in Visual Studio. And without any changes, let's just start it to see what it is. So let's start it. And what the first difference is, obviously, the launch settings, because this is a new template. And the old template, down there, it has the launch settings configured so that it instantly pops up the browser and shows the Swagger UI, which makes totally no sense anymore. The thing is running on port 7028 right now. But the launch settings here, which I explained in the first video, they don't have the launch browser settings set to true because it makes no sense. Why does it make no sense? Because when I go there, obviously, there is no /Swagger anymore, which should be logical to everybody because we don't want Swagger anymore as a citizen. So instead, we have a route going on, which by default is this one. And here you are again seeing OpenAPI schema-based JSON, which was generated now not by Swashbuckler, but somehow it was generated differently. That's exactly the whole talk. Okay, what's going on? Let's look into my thingy. So now here is a NuGet package inside of this, which is not Swashbuckler anymore, but it is now ASP.NET Core OpenAPI in the version 9.01. And let's quickly format this guy. So the first thing I'm going to do, I will do a lot of copy over stuff. Okay, so bear with me. So I take this and I replace it here. The only thing is I will remove the user secret and I will again put that to .NET 9. So what this brings me, that I have this right root namespace and assembly name again in. And with that, what I now need to do, I need to go to the controller a little bit. And to be honest, in order to make this work again, I don't want to mess around with it and bring it back and blah, blah, blah. I just go over to my old controller. Here it is. And I just copy all of this. La, 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 la. And I replace it here. Here you go. Okay. Now he is not sure what this is, but no problem. I can reference my logic interfaces and bring it in. Here we go. And then he does not know what this is. ASP not versioning. For the moment, let's just skip this. We also need to skip the route because that wouldn't work, and go back to the default route for the moment, which is just the controller name. So here we go. This is a route. Everything else stays the same. Now this needs to live in another namespace. Please do it resharper. This is resharper in place. And he says, well, this is strange because what is services OpenAPI? I don't know what this is. I'm not sure either why he has problems with that, so I remove it, this global thing, and he says weather forecast. Yeah, weather forecast is not here. It is in import type this one from my libraries, and remove this guy, which we don't need. Also remove the HTTP file for reasons I explained yesterday. And now this thing is good. And let's try out if it still works, if it's building. So it should fail as soon as we try to get the weather forecast. So let's say when I now add the endpoint, which is weather forecast location, we should get an error. I don't know, Denver again. And we get an error, which is an famous activator utils error. Yes, because I forgot to do something, which is this line from my old project to add dependency injection to my builder. So here's my builder. Good that we visit it now. So right after or before controllers, let's add my line first. Here, the first. Okay, so let's remove all the stupid things. So here we go. So the main things, as I already mentioned, which are changed is this is different now and this is different now. So this is where the new thing comes in, and it's using its own things from this NuGet package. Okay, so now with that in place, let's try again to get some weather data finally. Just F5 this, and here we get weather data for whatever. So this is now working again. Of course, no Swagger, nothing, but you know, he has this and he's not aware of the versioning and so on. So this is the current state and we're good. So now let's go. First thing I want to add is this versioning thing. Okay, I want to re-add the fact that this lives on different versions. What I can do, what I can do here is to just bring that in, like I did it like this. This was the versioning, and it was based on Swagger options. So first things we need to do is we copy stuff over. So let's start. My app settings. My app settings, I will copy them over as they are. And also don't forget the development settings. Copy them over as well. So you don't need to do that. You just, see. Let's do it. So here we go. But let's switch over Swagger by OpenAPI because I want to make clear that this is not using Swagger anymore. This is now OpenAPI. Let's save everything and close everything. Okay, so far so good. I just copied it over. Step next is to go to my logic models and to just copy this thing. Just create a copy as it is and just rename it to OpenAPI configuration. I do not have to do it exactly this, but I want to make clear it could have different options. Anyways, I don't want to have Swagger in the name anywhere. Good. So next thing is, see that options. I did that to generate the Swagger options. I had this configuration extension and so on. So what this means, I will need those extension methods here. Okay, so let's put another folder in, extensions. And the first thing I need is configuration extensions. So let's copy this over here, give it the correct namespace. And now we handle this in a second. And the first thing I want to change is that this is not getting the Swagger configuration in this project, but the OpenAPI configuration. Here we go. And then this is on OpenAPI, and this is also here and here. Besides, I want to name it correctly here because it's spelled name, and then also here. And then this is get OpenAPI options. That's all. I just do that. Now let's take care of this. We will need it later. The whole thing why this is red is because we're missing a NuGet package. Let's hop over and get it. This is Microsoft Identity Web. So let's get this NuGet package into our new project. Just copy over the package reference, do it this way, and he will install the package, and then at some point in time it gets green or whatever this color is. So our configuration extensions basically work the same as it did before. With that, I can go now to my program and say, well, you know what, var, what is that? OpenAPI options is builder, configuration. And remember, this extension method is extending the iConfiguration interface, which says get, there it is. There's my extension method. Let's do this. And because I will need it, var identity options is the same thing, and get identity options. Here we go. So we have this in place. Nice and easy. So now those options, let me show you. Breakpoint here, start the program, hit the breakpoint, and let's look what's going on. OpenAPI options is just read out from my config. It reads this int array and then converts this int array to an API version thingy, which is a thing which comes from .NET, and then I have those things filled in. Okay, cool. Next thing I need to do is I also need to bring in this two NuGet packages here in order to be able to have API versioning, which is a .NET thing from ASP, in my project as well. So let's do that. I installed the NuGet packages. And with that now, I can look into other extensions, which were the, I think, service collection extensions. Here we go. Because here's this add API versioning internal. Let's copy this as well. So we reuse a lot of stuff from the first sample. So let's say this is the other namespace. That so far so good. And let's see what we can rid of. So we want to keep API versioning. And now let's see. Do we need this? This is Swagger Gen. We are not going to use Swagger Gen anymore. Remove this method completely. This is join XML commands, which we will do differently. The XML commands thing, we don't need it. So remove that as well. This again uses Swagger Gen. We are not going to use Swagger Gen anymore. So remove that completely. And then we have use versioning. And versioning also uses Swagger Gen. So we don't need that. And again, Swagger Gen here, so we don't need it as well. So all what's left is the API versioning internal. So let's call this now in my program. And we can copy this from the other program, this line. This is the line I want to copy. And let's go to my program and do it as well. And then pass in the OpenAPI options. So that means it needs to take in OpenAPI options. Remember, that's what we configuration options that we just copied over here, this thing. And all it does is it goes in and detects the versions inside. I explained that in the first video, and adds kind of routing options for every version we have. Last thing, which is left over, is go to the controller, remove this what I did just right now, uncommand this, import API versioning, and that's it. So let's go and run this now and get an error because we still have Swashbuckle, Swagger Gen. I don't know where this is coming from. Just use, this was leftover namespace imports. Never mind. ReSharper took care of that real quick. And then this API started again. Let's go here and go to the endpoint. First of all, it's not working anymore. This endpoint does not exist. Why is that? OpenAPI / still v1 JSON. Here you go. And now the thing that changed is the path. So he respects now the path. OpenAPI happily saw the API versioning coming in. But the problem now is, if you expect this, because we have two versions, right? We have API version 1 and 2 configured in our app settings. What's not going to happen is v2 is not a thing. So what happens is he detects, looking at the controller, he meaning OpenAPI, or it, not he, that this is now on a different route, and this route will work without any problem, but he's not generating a second v2 JSON for the second version we have. So we need to tell him to do that. The same as we needed to tell that to Swashbuckle when we did it. Okay, cool. Before we do that, let's do a different thing. And it seems a little bit odd maybe when I do that, but still I want to do it. So what turns out where we can also take over another extension is the web application extension here. So now we copied nearly everything. And why I did this is because I still want to use Swagger UI. I don't want to use this. This is not what I'm going to use. I just want to use the UI. And for that, I will go and tell it to get rid of this. And you know what? Keep this as it is. The only thing that we can omit is the scopes and the separator and so on. We don't need to take care about this. So this is what we left with, the client ID, which is not part of the OAuth definition later anyways. So now we have this, and we will get rid of in a second of this in a certain way, but let's wait. So first of all, use Swagger UI is not available to us because we miss a package. So, but we are not taking all three of the packages. We only want to use the UI part. Remember my presentation? Those two things go away. We only want to use Swagger as a UI, and we can replace it by Scalar or whatever it is. But I want to keep Swagger. So let's go here and say I still want to use Swagger UI. That's it, not Swagger generation. So with that, this extension is happy again. And now what it does is it checks our options for if there are any API versions. If not, it should throw an exception. But anyways, this is going to be totally okay. He uses and gets the API versioning description provider. Again, it's the same code from the first video, but I explain it quickly. This gives information about our API versioning. And then for every description, aka version, which is in that, we just generate an endpoint. But this is the wrong one. This is not where OpenAPI is generating the documents, but we know where it's doing it. We simply need to say, no, the path is here. Then comes the group name, and then no Swagger, not at all, and it just .json. This is where Swashbuckle or Swagger, the UI, should expect the JSON to live instead of the default Swagger JSON. That's all. So last part is I need to call this extension method again, which is, let me see, this is taking the old one. Let's do the OpenAPI. And then the options for OpenAPI, and then add Swagger UI. That's the same thing, correct. So it adds Swagger UI. Let's do it. Program, and then down here, app, add, was it add or use? What was it? It is use Swagger UI internal. Use Swagger near this one. And this needs our OpenAPI options. We have it up there. That's exactly why I created it here. So I just reuse it, execute it. And now we can talk about /Swagger. So I didn't change this. This endpoint still is the endpoint. Actually, let's open a new tab for Swagger and see if he reacts. And sure enough, here he is. But he complains that he wants to display version 2, but remember, we're not yet configured OpenAPI to configure version 2, so that error is okay because version 1 exists, but version 2 does not. Nothing here. That's exactly what Swagger tells us. So let's go back to version 1 and then see, oh, here we go. He can do that. He's fine. I can even go there and enter something and execute this guy, and I get data. It totally works. So Swagger UI is back again. It's ugly, it's not perfect, but it works. Okay, cool. So Swagger UI done. Next thing is we need to now do better than this. At OpenAPI, it's just doing the plain stuff, and it has options and stuff like that, but this will be a lot of code again inside here, the same as we did with add Swagger last time and add Swagger again or whatever. We should extract it to somewhere else. So I prepared that already. Let me open my code on maybe another screen so that I can copy over stuff. Because as I said, I'm doing this the third time tonight. So I think it's legit to say I should use my stuff. Okay. What I want to do, I will bring in, first of all, the method. We go to service collection extensions, and let's click this in, and let's add a happy little method, which is just this one. Here you go, resharper, do your job. Will you? He's already done. So, and all I do for the moment, I return just what I need to return, and this is now called add OpenAPI internal. All this does is, this is the OpenAPI options from the config, whatever. Okay, this is, it needs to configure OpenAPI, and I do that so that I can now go here, builder, services, add OpenAPI internal. What do you need? You need the config options. Here you go. And this is the OpenAPI options. Here you go. And what else? He wants the identity options. I knew that. Guess why? So now he has this as well at OpenAPI internal. So from now on, I can concentrate on, where is that? I don't need you. Close everything. Go to the service collection extension. Here we are. So now with that, nothing changed. If I go and start this, I just put the whole configuration here. And now I forgot to put in, because I'm sometimes. So this is what at OpenAPI. And now when I start, this is just, I moved this method call here over to this extension method. That's all. It should not change anything. Should be happy. V1 is there. V2 is not. Same thing. But now we can put in our source code here. So what you need to understand is OpenAPI, this JSON file, is all that matters. So what's happening is in OpenAPI, this is kind of a route, like this /swagger is a route. /swagger is a route where some process is listening on. There's a middleware. The same is true for here. There's the middleware injected, which says I'm listening on /OpenAPI, and then whenever you hit a exact v something I know JSON, then I will deliver the document. Problem is, he is not aware that we have different versions in place. He just happily creates this method, just creates it for one version, and version 1 happens to be the default one. So what we need to do, we need to say, hey, listen, we have something in place, which is we have different API versions, and you can find them if you go to your config options, and there you have API versions. So we prep that, right? So listen, please generate OpenAPI for each of that version. How you do that? You cannot call it this way, because this would mean he will call it just twice. And this is just taking longer and having the same. No. But there is an overload, and this is this one. This is the overload I mean, where you can say, well, there's a document name, aka v1 JSON. Remember v1. And then it's an action here, which allows you to override how to create this v whatever document. So what we need to do is we say v, and then from that API version, the major version, and then all I want you to do is give me the option to do something to it, but I don't need to do it yet. So this is all I do. So now I call at OpenAPI twice, one time for every version I support. This is all I do. Let's look now. Let's restart this. And the easiest way to find out if it works is using Swagger now. Because remember, Swagger is, okay, v1 is still there. v2 is there too. That's it. Because now we have a v2 JSON all of a sudden. So v1 is still here, but v2 is also here. And it happens to be the same for us. No difference, just this thing. But here you are. Now we have both versions provided. Nice. So, next thing is, let's talk about, what do we do next, by the way? Okay, let's do a little bit about this metadata here, okay? Because it's bad. Okay, so in order to understand this, we need to grasp a big difference between OpenAPI and default Swashbuckle. I think you could do it in Swashbuckle as well, but you need to understand that there's this concept of transformers, that's what it's called in OpenAPI, which means, listen, if you leave the options as they are, we have some transformers in place, and they just happily transform your .NET stuff into OpenAPI stuff. But you can create your own transformers and tell us how you want to do that. This is what we need to do. So the options here give us the thing to add transformers kind of like to the transformer pipeline. So we will do that, and we will use the function approach, and this is always the same. Every transformer, and there are 3 of them. There's document transformer, there's operation transformer, and schema transformer. I will talk about at least document and operation transformers. So they always come in a flavor. You can do the generic thing, then you just have a thing that I think implements an interface and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. So the easiest way to do is let's have this. This is a function. We need to provide a func, an anonymous in this case, which takes in a document transformer context, a cancellation token, and returns a task, which gets important in a second. So what we do is, here is a function. Let's give me the document, give me the context, and I don't care about the cancellation token right now. This is how I do it in .NET. So this parameter, the third one, gets passed in somehow from OpenAPI to me, but I ignore it. This is red because we need to return a task. And the easiest way to do this is to return a completed task. Now he's happy, he says this method is useless, I know, but at least we can hit a breakpoint and look what doc and ctx provide us and when it's called. So with that, let's do another run. This starts up, nothing happens. So this thing does not get called right away, right? So this method got called, but this is not. Go over, refresh your v2 or v1 JSON, doesn't matter. As soon as you do that, this gets called. So it doesn't get called once, it gets called every time somebody is trying to get the JSON. Meaning, whatever you do inside of here, don't do a heavy lifting, meaning don't do a database context here or something like that. That would be a bad idea. Okay, anyways, so now here is doc and ctx. So what is doc? It's an OpenAPI document. Here you go. And you have a lot of stuff which you can override. Keep in mind components is still now. Then you have something like info, which has no information at all, which we're going to fix now, and so on and so on. So you have a bunch of stuff. Nice. And then you have a context, which points you to, in this case, this is a document transformer context, and it gives you access to your application services, where, for instance, you can get dependency injection stuff coming out. Description groups, which is nothing else than your versions that you have. I can prove that. This is the first one, and this is the one, and then this tells you, well, version 1, and here, version 1, and then you have relative path. So basically, this is your weather forecast controller. So those items are your controllers that you have, your API description. Cool. And then what you also have is a document name, which is v2. You should not change it, but now you know which version is he trying to generate right now. Okay, fine. So with that, what we know what we can do is do the metadata. So what we can do is doc has an info element, What we can say is, first of all, the title of this is from my OpenAPI options, config options, the API name, let's say. And then doc info description is from my config options, the description. Sure is that. And then what we also had is doc info contact. We have contact information. This is a structure by its own. Let's do that. Let's just override the contact in the dot manner and say the name should be from my config options, the contact, which is just a string. Here we go. And that's all we do. Let's remove the breakpoint, F5 this, look at Swagger. Here is the interesting part, F5 this. And here you go. It changed it. It's reading out my API, a YouTube sample API. No contact here because I missed the email from the contact, but the contact name is generated, no problem whatsoever. So this is how you do that. And of course you have to do it for every document. So you do it in the document transformer. So every time this is generated, it reads in the data and shows it in. So also meaning, let me see, this is my, let's say, development API. Let's do that. And it should show this name instead of my API when I'm in development mode, which I am currently. Let's see if this works. Perfect. My development API, see? As if this was a big achievement, but you know. This is the third time I do it, if I didn't mention it. So I'm pretty happy that it's turned out again. Cool. So now the next thing I want to check on the document actually. So let's add a command here and say metadata. That's it. Now it's time to take care about the authorization. Yeah, we put in OAuth again. So it's a little bit complicated, it's a little more complicated, but I'll explain that. So first things first, the types OpenAPI uses for this, something like OpenAPI, what was it, security scheme and stuff like that, are the same we used here. So let's take a look. Where was this OAuth configuration? Use OAuth. And here we had OpenAPI security scheme. This type is not coming from Swashbuckle. It did not come from Swashbuckle. Swashbuckle just used this. This is a type which is there, which makes it pretty easy for us to do that. So first of all, what we need to understand that in order to generate the same outcome, the first thing we need to ensure is that, is it running? No, it's not. Let's run it. Because this is hard to understand, I know, but it's not that hard at all. And I'm trying my best to explain it to you. So how this security comes in, the same as it was with Swashbuckle. Let's get rid of a lot of stuff here, which is not so important. This is coming in here at the components area. So if you watched the first part, you saw that here something else was added, which was security schemas. And that's what we need to do. So we need, this is kind of a library of things that can be referenced by all other things. And we need to add the library item for the OAuth2 options. And turns out there's no difference. We just can reuse it. The thing we need to do is, let's do off stuff. Okay. Well, we need to say doc, and then where does it need to be? It needs to be in the, there is components, because here it needs to be. See how this matches, info matches this part, and component matches this part. So it's easy to understand. We want not to add schemas, which would be this guy. We want to add a security schemes, and there's the add method. We can totally do that. So first thing he wants us to do is, what is the key for this thing? And let me copy this out. This is the name of thing like it was last time. Where is it? Document transformer. There it is. Name of. So this is the thing it needs to be. So this is our key. Simple saying, name of says, take this and make a string out of it. So it's the same saying this as I would have said, my key is please this. But this is a bad thing to do because it's, you know, if you copy paste stuff, you know, I'm not talking about the name of is the thing. And then what is your security scheme? So let's say I name this variable OAuth scheme to make it a little bit. So var OAuth scheme needs to be set now. And that's why I looked here. Look what this is. This is the same code as here. Add security definition. Basically, I could have copied this out as well, but I will do it in 2 lines. So let me copy this whole security scheme out of our existing Swagger sample and put it in here. That's it. It totally builds, okay? It has no types. What the heck? So let's go out. It has no types involved which are specific to Swashbuckle. So I can totally use this scheme, no problem, and add it to the security schemes. It will create an exception, which I want you to see in order to understand what's going on, but this has nothing to do with the config. This scheme is generated using the same identity options as I did in the other project. No change whatsoever. It's the same thing. So let's go. And it will fail right away with a simple .NET based exception. Let me hit F5 here, and it fails because it has a null reference exception, because the components, I showed it for you, is null. There's a simple fix for that, and we should do it right away here at the top and say, well, listen, if the components is null, this is that. If left side is null, then set it to a new instance of API component. This is simply ensuring that as soon as this line is hit, this is never null. That's a fix. That's it. And this is totally legit, but only set it if it's not set already. That's what this is doing. F5, he's fine. And what he added is what I told you. He adds a security scheme. This is the key, and this is the definition of the scheme. And here you are. That's it. The only thing is missing is, for instance, my scope and stuff, and that has to do with another thing. Let's go there and fix that. So in the README, I told you guys, if you want to test it out, you need to set 3 secrets. So let's do that together. I need to prep everything because currently our project here is not ready. It has no user secrets defined. So how you do that? So it turns out it's easy. .NET user secret init. The init, you don't have to do the init. I do it, and this generates this GUID. This gets checked in. You don't do that. Only thing is project source. Which project? Services OpenAPI. Do it in this project. He did it, and here you go. Here you can see it. He always messes up the indentation, but this is, he now created a new user secret with a new ID. That's the precondition in order to use user secrets. Fine. So now I can take out this and I have to populate it. So it turns out I did it already on my machine for this other project. So I can use the list command. And then I say, well, you know what? In this other project, .NET user secrets list, and I mistyped, and I don't have command history for that for some reason. I don't know what's going on, but I miss command history for the .NET user secrets thingy. So here you go. This is my secrets. You can totally see that. With that, I can copy out this guy. I prepped it for you guys so that you can put in whatever is your tenant ID and so on. So let me go there, and you will watch me doing it. 1. And then next one, which is this. Copy paste. And I probably should have do the environment variables shorter, but this time I messed this up. But anyway, I mean the replacement pattern, and this is now the same thing because my client ID is this. There we go. User secrets are set, which means in Visual Studio, for instance, you could have done it in Visual Studio, of course, manage user secrets, and here you go. And I did not show that to you because I want you to do some work as well. As I always say, my channel, my rules. So here you have it. Okay, so with that, if I execute it now, what happens is, now he has my scope here. That's fine. And now if I hit F5, all of a sudden an authorize button is back. I did nothing to change on the Swagger config, right? And if I hit authorize, you just need to understand that this client ID is here because, and only because, I added in my, I cheated a little bit because I copied this in. You need to do that because the whole operation now, when I click this button, this is done by this configuration here, by this configuration. And now I click authorize and I get authorized, which should make you, how is that possible? Because when I look in my program, I don't have any authorization logic here yet. And that tells you this was true all the time. This button generated a barra token. It did. But it turns out that this is done by the Swagger UI internally because you configure it to do. This has nothing to do with .NET authorization. Okay, you still need to put in .NET authorization, which is a one-liner, thankfully, to the identity web package, which I already have. This is the one that I need to execute. Remember, this comes from the Microsoft Web Open Identity package, Microsoft Identity Web, that's the name. Doesn't matter where you put the service injection in, you just copy it over, it should work because I already have Microsoft Identity Web in my packages. So that's it. And with that in place, we should be good to test out our authorization, and it will not work completely because we miss out something. It will not work at all, probably. We will see. F5 this, authorize, I'm still authorized. Go there, try it out. Again, Denver, whatever, execute. Cool, but only cool because this endpoint accepts to be called without barra token because there are no barra tokens sent. So meaning, if I go now here and tell the controller, you know what? allow anonymous was yesterday. Breaking change coming up. You need to authorize against this now as well. Execute it again, and we will get a 401 because he's not sending the bearer token. So now my .NET authorization middleware is in there checking, oh, this needs authorization somehow, and no, it's not happening. How did we fix it last time? Well, last time, or in the first thing, we added authorization to like a global requirement. So in the JSON, if you saw the first part, down here, there was another thing, security thing, saying no matter what, this whole API needs that Swagger injects this. This was this requirement thing. And we need to do something similar now. So next issue, how do we tell the thing meaning OpenAPI, that if you hit certain methods, you need to send the bearer token. That is what we need to tell him. And we did not do that on Swagger. This is a big difference because simple, I don't know how to do it in Swagger. I always did it globally and I send out a bearer token no matter what. That's it. That's what I did. Okay, but let's do it better than that. So this is the place where we switch back from the document thingy. This was document transformer. Now we go to another transformer, which is the operation transformer. And it has a similar pattern. Op is like the operation, core API operation. Then it has a context as well, a bearer token as well, which we don't care about. And we return task completed task. That's it. So now we need to hit a breakpoint again and understand when is this called. So, and what does it pass in? So if I now again on my API and hit F5, it gets hit. It's getting hit. And now what this is, the locals here this time is an OpenAPI operation, not a document, and an operation transformer context. So the operation we have now points to, where do we have it? It has no operation ID, yeah, because we don't do it. And it has no information about itself whatsoever. So that's the first thing. The next thing is the context is a bit more speaking to us. What it says, it has, again, application services in order to get everything all we need. But now the description, first of all, the document name is v2, and the description now is something completely different. It says, I'm pointing currently, this one is called for a get method, obviously. And if you look into the action descriptor, and here the path tells us which action, but you know, I don't know what this is exactly. But the action descriptor is a very helpful thing because he says, well, actually the action name that you're looking at is get next days. This is what I currently want to write into the document. So it turns out we get the document transformer called once for every document. And then inside of that document, for every operation, for every path, we get the operation transformer called. So this gets called a lot of times. Be aware that, again, you do your logic here with that in mind. Where am I? Here, locals. So this thing has two sides of it. One is the OpenAPI side, which is like the action name and the, what is that? There's something like the controller name, weather forecast. This is like the OpenAPI view of that, the HTTP view. And then there is this .NET view, because now you have the controller type, which is the .NET type, and this is the weather forecast controller itself. And you have the action, where is method info. This is pointing to actually the function that is doing all the heavy lifting. And there you can get all kinds of interesting stuff like what is the name of the method. It is, in fact, get next days async and not get next days and so on. So this all is delivered for every endpoint to you. And here you can use it. So what we're going to do is we will generate, first of all, something which is called, and we will do it outside of this method. In preparation for that, we will generate an OpenAPI security scheme. And you say, wait a minute, we did that already. I know, guys, we did it in the document transformer, but we generated the security scheme completely, the whole definition. What we do here inside of it, it's not the scheme itself, it's a reference to something. So the reference is an OpenAPI type, like a pointer, and it says, well, I'm pointing to this type of information. It's a security scheme. Well, exactly, that's what it is here. And the ID or the key I'm pointing to is this. This is the magic. So I create this type called reference scheme. So now I want to, on every method where I need to point to that scheme, I will add it. So that would mean, naive way to do it is, let me see that. Where do I have it? Operation Transformer. And then the thing I would need to add is this one. This is the thing. So turns out what this is, every operation has a security property. And this is a list of possible OpenAPI security requirements. If it's empty, okay, you don't have any requirement. But if you want to have a requirement, you do this. And because this is always the same requirement, pointing to the same reference scheme, we could take this and put it here. And then this way we only have to generate it once per document. And then we can pass it to every security scheme of every method. This is not the final result. This is now, again, no matter what, giving any method the security requirement. So let's try it out. This is not where we're going to stay. Let's check the JSON. So now what happens is, here you see it upcoming. This one says, I have the requirement. If you wondering what this empty area is, it's the scopes that this guy needs. But since we're using the same scopes in the reference, we don't need to pass anything in. This is this array empty. We can totally give it something like that. No, this was, what was it? Identity options, scope to array. We can do this. Now it turns a little bit, I don't know why this is called scope, by the way. It should be scopes, but because it's a collection with a single name. I don't get it. But anyway, if you do it this way, all you do, you explicitly say for all these scopes, point to the security scheme with this ID. Okay, this is the ID and the same scopes. And because it's the same scopes, you don't need to do it. You don't need to do it. So that's why I'm doing array empty. Let me bring array empty again so we don't clutter too much into our OpenAPI. But you need to be very careful here. Okay, but now if I run this, this means I got exactly the situation which I didn't want really. I got the old behavior, right? So if I execute this again, I need to F5, Denver, whatever, execute. Now he sends the bearer token no matter what. But he does not need to send the bearer token, as you and me know, because this thing is allow anonymous. How can we prevent this from happening? And now we can, very easily. There is the concept of, in the action descriptor I showed you here, there's a concept which is called endpoint metadata. So what we can see is we want to say something like needs, what do we say? Needs requirement. And this is, we can deduce that if we go to the context, go to the description of the context. This has an action descriptor. And this thing turns out to have this endpoint metadata, which is a list of objects. So because it's a list, we can apply link to it. And we are only interested in a certain type of endpoint metadata. So then we say, well, please select this list and only retrieve elements which are matching the I authorize or authorization. What was it? I authorize data. Is it? Authorize data. Only that. I explain that in a second. And then any. So that means in link language, this is a bool, right? Because any returns a bool saying if this filter operation, only retrieving elements of a certain type, returns in any element, then this is true, otherwise it's false. So meaning we can say if needs requirement then add the requirement, otherwise do not add the requirement. So now we have it's still not finished, okay? You need to understand, what is this? What are we doing? So I debug this. Let's go here. It's easier to understand. So here we are, and needs requirement was resolved to true. Why is that? So you go to the endpoint metadata, and during runtime you can easily look at this. Here you see, and here you see an authorize thing in place, and this tells you, okay, this is I authorize data, will return that. Why is it not authorize? Well, I explain that in a second. So why is that? It is because the controller has an authorized attribute on it, and I remove that authorized attribute. In other words, I am not explicitly enabling authorization requirement. That means all of the methods here in that controller are now allow anonymous, kind of, because I never said globally everything needs to be. So now needs requirement is false because this attribute is missing. What else can I do? I can say, well, actually, cool, but I want this to be authorized. So now I'm not inheriting authorized from the controller, but from here. Okay, let's do it again. And now, without us having to bother, it is true again, because the action descriptor endpoint metadata contains authorized. It doesn't care from where it comes. This time it comes from the method. Last time it came from the controller. Doesn't matter for us. This is how this works in .NET. So, good way, good thing. The other way, by the way, it could be injected is globally in your app startup. You can say authorize anything. I don't want to be able to forget that on any controller and then happily expose something I didn't want to expose. You can do that on different ways. That's why I authorize data. This is more the generic way saying, is there somehow something regarding authorization on that method? And yeah, that's it. Okay, this is naive because now I have a problem. Because if I go and do again allow anonymous on this method, so in other words saying, well, there might be other methods which needs authorization, but explicitly this one should be unauthorized. So what happens is now, when we F5 again, it is still true because this query is kind of dumb. It says, is there any authorization in this endpoint metadata? Yes, of course, it's still there because it comes from the controller, but endpoint metadata now also has anonymous in it. So that kind of switches off this one. So let's do that correctly. We say var allows anonymous would be CTX description, action descriptor, endpoint metadata of type. And then what about I allow anonymous? Let's do that. Any. I'm just guessing. I'm not guessing because I did it today, but anyway. So now the logic is, if it's not allowed to be anonymous, and only if not, and so this term gets evaluated only if this is not true. So this is better now, because now I'm really checking if this method on its context, and it's false, because allow anonymous is true, and he never evaluated this expression, so needs requirement is not allows anonymous, so it does not need requirement. So with that in place, watch what happens. Now, Swagger, F5 this guy, and now I'm still authorized, but when I try to send something, he's now putting a bearer token on it. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And the different thing than it was before, but look how neatly it's configured. It's really easy to read, stating that you know what endpoint metadata and link is, but you know, it's .NET wise pretty easy to read. And now you understand why I'm not putting the generation of these things inside here, because this gets called n times, okay? N meaning the number of operations that you have. If you have 10 endpoints, this gets called 10 times. So only do the stuff which is needed for the single endpoint. But every endpoint gets the same requirement. It's the same requirement. So you can reuse those things, just build it once here, the reference, and then just reuse it. That's what I'm saying. Nice. So this is endpoint of requirement. This is what this is doing. Before we do that, another thing we need to care is Operation ID. Remember, we had this in the other thing. So let's talk about this. And also let's talk about why we even need it. In order to explain that, I need to go to a different direction. What time is it in recording? I don't even know, where do I see that? What time are we? Did I forget to record? Oh, 1 hour now. Oh, this time. Let me have a sip of coffee, a little break. So, I did not explain last time why Operation ID even should bother you. So let's do that. In the Microsoft documentation, there is something I learned. And this is the following. If I go to OpenAPI here and I go to .NET 9, which is very important because it changed the documentation, .NET 9. So it gives you a lot of stuff I just explained to you, like the NuGet packages you need and so on. And then it has, I think here, it has a neat little thing. Where is it? Generate OpenAPI documents at build time. So this is interesting, and this is one of the big improvements between or from Swashbuckle to OpenAPI, because there is this NuGet package now, this one, and let's add this NuGet package and follow this description. Let's go there. So I add it to my project, manage NuGet package, search for it, and this is the MS build tasks and targets for build time Swagger and OpenAPI document generation. So this is probably not new, but I wasn't aware of it. So I learned something here, which is nice. So I add this package. And now it gets important that I added this OpenAPI to my git ignore. So you will see now why I did that. So because next thing you do is you can add some things, and I prepped this a little bit better, I hope. Yeah, I have this. This is here install package, and then you have some property group things. Okay, so let's go here and show you the final version of my thing. So I added an own property group here, and I'm saying, first of all, on build time, remember build time, not runtime, generate OpenAPI documents, please do it. Then I explain which folder to use. This is exactly this OpenAPI folder I told him to ignore. And then I give him the option to name those sample.json, by the way. As soon as I did this, watch what happens when I build this. Look the folder structure, build. And now the build process generates the JSON for me, which is so nice because I don't have always to look up in the runtime what it is, but be aware. This is a little bit limited, as you will see in a second, but still very useful. So you see, for instance, the security schemes here coming up. You see that a method, this one, has no security bound to it. You see all of that just by building a project, which is very nice. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you now have tooling in place. And let me go to the project folder because it makes life easier. And one of the tools Microsoft suggests is Scalar. Not Scalar. What I mean is Spectral. There it is. Which is a linter for OpenAPI, for instance. And it's a little bit weird because in order to get Spectral installed, I had to write yarn install -g spectral because there is no Windows installation as far as I could see for Spectral. There's a Docker image for that, which is a little bit too much for my taste in order to get a linter in place. So option one is use yarn install. So when you have this, you can say, well, linter, go there and lint everything in that folder. And he says no rule set has been found. Well, actually, because I skipped one step of the documentation, which is, where was that? There was something I missed. And I will totally show it to you. It's somewhere in the documentation. I cannot find it, but I think I have it. You need to have a file, they tell you, which is called .spectral.yaml. And then you need to have this string inside of the file. So I just have this one-liner to generate this file. Here it is. It just generated the file. It has to be somewhere in the folder structure above this command. With that file in place, you can lint. And that says no severity of error found. By the way, I cannot tell you, I did not find out how I can use Spectral to show me warnings, because this actually is what he found. In order to see that, I have another tool for you. So open VS Code in with the folder OpenAPI open. That's my trick. And you see those files right here. And then I added an extension which is called Spectral. So this is a VS Code extension. Having this in place helps you a lot, because you go to your sample or v2 JSON and it is yellow. And not only that, if you do your thing, you can go to the problems and it tells you why it's yellow. It has 3 warnings. Great. So 3 warnings, but remember, I'm looking into the build time generated JSON. So be very, very aware what you're looking at. Because for instance, he says servers must be present and non-empty array. And you think, yeah, right, where's servers? Because when you look here, there's totally servers. There it is. Yes, the reason that there are servers is because this is not the file in the OpenAPI folder. This is the, you know what I mean, the served file. So what you can totally Google, you take the raw file, generate a new one, online JSON here, just for the sake of trying out, and then you let him test this. Let's check the online. And now this service thing disappeared, because now he's checking this file and only 2 are remained, like Operation ID, and that is what the whole story was about. Now we are finally back. So you need an Operation ID in order to have a well-formatted OpenAPI document. That is what Spectral tells us. And we don't want to have this warning, and Operation ID is a good thing. I could tell you why this is. I'm not doing it. Read it up. But this is a real thing. And remember, we had this Operation ID in our first sample, if you watched it. So this is what we're going to do, and now you know why I'm doing it. Okay. Easy peasy. So how do we do that? So I will just paste in some code, and then I tell you why. So of course, because I'm coding freaks, I'm not doing things the simple way. I try to do things the right way. So I added this bunch of code. So first of all, there's a condition, and we talk about the condition later. So let's talk about this thing here. So what we do, we take use of the context of the operation, go to the description, and then we get the HTTP method and lower it. So we get, post, whatever it is in the method name. The controller name, we go to the action descriptor, to the route values, and take the controller out, which is, I think, cheaper than going to the type information and take out the controller class name and remove the word controller. Okay, so this is a route value, the same for the action. Then I do this, and I explain why I do that. Go there, and let's see. So let's refresh that, and here it comes. So method name is get. Let me do locals. So the method name is get. The controller name is weather forecast, but now the action name is get next days, because the action name by default is generated by .NET, and he says, well, I take the method name and then the name of whatever I have. So I don't need that because get is already there. So that's why I said, no, execute this line. Action name is get next days, and after this line, it is just next days. Because now my operation ID, what I want is to be this way. Weather forecast next days and then get. That is why I did this simple .NET stuff. Okay. With that in place, generate the file. And now we have an operation ID, as you can see. And then if we look up here in our thingy, is he aware that this got generated? I'm not even sure. I think not. I don't know why. But let's look up whatever we have this here. Let's copy this out. Let's go to my online JSON here, replace it, and he sees, okay, fine, you now have an operation ID. Here it is, which is good, but you're still missing the description of that operation. I know, because the last thing is missing, which will be XML commands. Okay, cool. What about what I promised? What about this condition? What am I doing here? So I'm again going to this infamous endpoint metadata, and now I'm filtering on endpoint name attribute. Why I'm doing that? So easy. Because there is a way in .NET built in to do operation IDs, which is like this. You go there and you add an attribute, endpoint name, and you say something like, here you go. This is my operation ID. Yes, do it. So in that case, I don't want to override it with that thing, because obviously the programmer of the method I'm looking at decided to have its own operation ID. So I don't want to override it and to leave him puzzled saying, why is this not working? So always be aware of stuff like that. You need to have deeper knowledge about what .NET enables you, because if colleagues of you know about endpoint name attribute, they get confused by your logic because they don't know that you override them constantly, no matter what. So now this endpoint should not be, what is that, by the way? Why is my mouse cursor not? That's interesting. Visual Studio has decided that my mouse cursor should be this. Oh, now. No? Okay. So he's kind of confused. So let's see if I can get rid of it. So now I have this operation ID in place, and he never reached this point. Oh man, I have to restart Visual Studio, obviously. So he never reached this breakpoint because this condition told him, you will not have to do it, because he decided to have his own endpoint name. Let me restart my Visual Studio here real quick. Real quick was, what's this called? Sarcastic? I think ironic. I think irony it's now on my channel. It's arrived finally on my channel. Irony. I think it was there before, but not so stupid. Okay, so here we go. And then all we need to do is, hey, weather forecast controller, you know what? You don't need to do that, especially not with this dumb emoji. But this was showing you this is possible. Great. This leaves us with one more quest, which is XML commands. And I'm a little bit proud of that, because XML commands is something they don't show you. And I have to puzzle a little bit around in my head how to do it. And then I finally thought, well, it's .NET. It's all .NET here. I can totally do that. And turns out, yeah, kind of. You cannot do it perfectly, but kind of. Okay, let's show you what I mean. So let's bring in some source code. And be aware, this is a lot. And disclaimer before I show that, this is not ready for production. So whatever I paste in here now is pretty much, you need to overwork it. It's still in the source code, you can see it, but you need to overwork it. So here, it starts here. So first of all, I again say, only do whatever is here if there is no endpoint description attribute. And that is the same as it was with the operation ID. So you learned something. Endpoint description is there to add exactly this description stuff. Anyways, so obviously this is not complete, because now I have controller types and XML summary missing, and I need to put that into place. This is some helper stuff I created. It's even more source code than you thought. So with that, let me paste in somewhere here at the top the missing pieces. First thing is this. So I thought about, should I explain what this means, or should I just skip and leave you alone? And I'm thinking I explained that. Skip that if you just fast forward if you know what this means. But what I'm using here is the .NET built-in type, which is a lazy, which is a type which represents the implementation of the programming pattern of a lazy thing. So what does it mean? A lazy thing is something which if you put it in its value generator, which is just the method here, how the method is obtained, is executed at a maximum of 1 time during the lifetime of this thing. So how it works in .NET is you have a lazy of something. This could be anything, lazy string, lazy int, whatever it is, doesn't matter. So let's look at where it's used. It's used somewhere here. This is the lazy name controller types, and then you say .value. So this comes from lazy .value, and it is of the value you just type array in this case. So as soon as you hit .value, the lazy will intelligently say, very simple, did I run once already? And the first time it will say, no, I never ran. So what it does, it returns this, it executes this code, and then it stores, before returning the actual value, it stores it internally. So that when you hit it the second time, he says, oh, this value is already cached. I did execute that. I will not execute the code again. I will just return the value. You know this pattern. You can do it with a member variable and store the value, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to do it your own, because this is, you can use lazy. Lazy does it for you. It has some limitations where you can use, but I use it in a static read-only manner, which means I'm on a static class. So the value behind it is stored on this. So because I know that where I use this, right, this usage here down here, this one, we know that this gets called every time we serve the JSON. So in order to prevent ourselves from, as soon as our API run, to do the expensive stuff like going reflection, this is using reflection, in order to prevent us to do it all over again, I put it into a lazy, thus ensuring the first time it gets used, it gets called, and afterwards it's just serving the value. I hope this explanation was okay. So then finally, what does it do? So you know what? Let me do a little trick in Visual Studio. See this little thingy here? In case you didn't know, you can split your window into 2. You can leave the window here, and then I can move up to whatever it is. You know that? That's the same file, and you have it split in 2. I bet you knew it. Anyway, so now what the lazy does, it goes to the entry assembly, which during runtime means the assembly that created the process, I think that's what it needs. It gets all the types, filtering out only those types which are public, not abstract, and which are inheriting from controller base. In other words, it gets the type information of all controllers, thus the name controller types. So it goes here in order to get from the descriptor the controller information. That's what it does. Anyways, this was the whole story, and then it does some mumbo jumbo, and then it wants again another lazy, which is called XML summary info. So let's introduce you with this monster. I have it here. I have a description on it, so actually I don't have to do anything in order to explain this to you. It's the same pattern. It's a private static read-only lazy. It gets executed only once. So what this guy does is, and not perfect, he's not having the join XML stuff and so on, but he's loading the XML file, which I explained latest, and then generates a dictionary. And the dictionary happens to be like the information of the member types. So that's basically it. If you want to know more, look it up. You can easily tell that this is not a very good code because of the nesting here. I usually have the early exit thing, so I would do return whatever, but this is naive, like 4th grade. I need to do it quickly code. And you down here, he's just saying, well, I now use this XML summary info to try to find a matching element for the method I am on. And if this method is there, this is the final thing. Summary is description, and description is desk. So I put those 2 values, description and summary, to the same value, basically. You can put a breakpoint on it on your own. So this is how you get rid of the split. And now you can split again, and you put it up, and you can do that several times. You cannot split it in 3 sections, I'm guessing, because I don't see the splitter anymore. Okay. Anyways, so with that in place, and I now have even Visual Studio split window in my OpenAPI tutorial. This is great. So let's see if it works. First of all, let's do the F5, and sure enough, here it is. And then, of course, it's also here. Now you have your XML documentation here. And what's more important, if I copy this raw blah blah blah, go over to my thing, now no yellows left. If I now go and rebuild my project here, which, as you know, will regenerate sample JSON and sample v2 JSON. If I do this and I go here, you will see that this is not getting, it's getting the operation ID, but it's not getting the other stuff, which is pretty darn interesting. It gets all of this, but it's not executing my description. Stuffy. I don't know why, to be honest. I guess maybe because of the static and lazy and I don't know what. But somehow it is not executing my XML thingy. Maybe because he's not building really, and that is why he's not having the XML file in the right location. And I could guess that this is saying, well, actually I don't have XML information. So during build time, you probably don't get this. But long and behold, what I could do if I want to, where is it? There is this endpoint description attribute, right? The same with operation ID is here. So I could go totally to weather forecast controller and say not only endpoint description and summary. Here you go. Description could be, again, this one. And now when I execute that, when I build it, this should work now because this is in .NET. And here you go. Description is here. Service is empty still. We can deal with that in a second. So during build time, I mean, right now I have a description because now he's able to retrieve the description directly from the code. So that is strongly pointing to the direction XML-based extraction is not working during build time, only during that time. And I strongly need to find out how to fix that. Maybe because during build time I want to lint, right? This is kind of, especially on a DevOps server later in a pipeline. Let's see how I fix that. But as I said, don't take this code into production, optimize it, or wait for me to optimize it or whatever. But it's working kind of this way. And here you go, here you have it. And this is kind of nearly the total picture. Recording is running. I cannot believe that I made it on the third try today. I'm very proud of myself. Whatever. I'm not, of course. But besides of that, it's pretty nice. I like that. I wanted to share one limit with you, and I have a screenshot prepped. And I said that there's a limit I detected on that. Let me see where my screenshots are. And I am getting, and maybe you get it too, when you have the schema generated, I am getting, let me put my ShareX somewhere on that screen so you understand. I got this in my Swagger in a certain project, and I was very confused. As soon as I tried to try out a method, I all of a sudden got this error telling me something is wrong with my schema. And then I obviously looked at the schema and I saw something like that. So this is happening in certain situations. I just want to point it out, and I need to find out and then post to Microsoft that something is odd. Swagger can totally handle this, swashbuckle I mean, and do it correctly, but OpenAPI NuGet from Microsoft does this. So what this is a model which is used in properties using inheritance. So there's an inheritance tree with vice versa thingies, a little bit complicated, but you know, it was clean. Swagger could see that, but basic option is inherit. So my parent type or my grandparent type or whatever defines the customer model, and so do I. In this situation, it can happen that this happens to your to your generated schemas. And then the API will work just fine, but the whole Swagger UI is just messed up. That's the point. So your API will work, no, doesn't matter, but you know, the experience is pretty bad, especially with that exception coming up on top, and then you see it there and it works not very professional. So we need to find out what's going on. Something is off there with the resolution of types. I tried to fix it by hand, I failed. So we need to do it. But let me see. I think that's it. That's what I wanted basically to show. And again, it's 1.5 hours nearly. And you see why, because I wanted to explain everything, not just throw it at you. And I want to show some stuff which is not visible in the documentation. There's more to it. There's more stuff in the documentation. You can go there and do deeper. I will do a little bit stuff to the source code here, and then I will put it up there into GitHub, finally upload my video, and then I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say in the comments section if you have any, and hopefully this helps you with going into that. Okay, have a good night. It's 2 a.m. I'm going to finish this and go to bed, or maybe not. Let's see.